evening, everyone. We're just waiting as our
Buenas noches a todos.
Ellen.
Okay, we're good on YouTube, but right now we have 10 attendees in here, so you might want to wait a few more minutes.
Yeah, we'll wait a little longer.
If we can.
Thank you. Good evening, everyone. We're just waiting a few more minutes as people begin to file in, and we'll get going in a little while.
Buenas noches a todos. Estamos nada más esperando a que se unan otros participantes a la sesión para comenzar.
We'll get going here in just a minute or two, just waiting as people file in.
Esperaremos 1 o 2 minutos más para que terminen de acompañarnos o unirse a la sesión otros participantes. Gracias.
And David, again, we're thinking about 51, right?
Yes, right now we've got 24.
Well, I know we have a lot to talk about, so why don't we get started? Good evening, everyone. My name is Dave Parker. I'm the superintendent of the Forest Grove School District. I want to take a moment to welcome everyone to this community meeting. We thank you for coming. It's critical that we get community feedback on these plans as we try to put together an efficient plan for our school district and for our community. We want it to be efficient and effective with your taxpayer dollars. But before we go any further, I want to introduce Claudia Limon, who will explain how to listen to this presentation in Spanish using the interpretation channel. So Claudia.
Y bueno, buenas noches. Ya se presentó el señor Dave Parker, que es el superintendente del distrito escolar de Forest Grove. Y ahora una servidora, Claudia Limón, voy a ser la intérprete. Si ustedes necesitan utilizar el servicio, por favor, vean las instrucciones que acabamos de pasar por el chat en español. Y bueno, también en su barra inferior van a ver un mundito Cuando vean ese mundo, tienen que seleccionar el idioma que desean escuchar, en este caso, español, y es todo lo que necesitan hacer. Thank you. It's done.
Okay, I'll start the interpretation and okay, we should be good.
Okay. And then I'd like to introduce David Warner, our communications director, just talk briefly about chat and the question and answer and how we want you to respond.
Perfect. As we get started in today's presentation, we'll be going through a PowerPoint presentation from Malum, and Leroy Landers will be leading that conversation with Dave Parker also participating. As we go through, there's some natural stopping points in there where Leroy will pause after a section and have a question and answer period. As the question arises, if you want to put that question into the Q&A function that's down there on the bottom of your screen, you can go ahead and put that in, and we'll have those questions queued up. And so when we get to that spot, I'll go ahead and read those to Leroy, and he and Dave Parker will answer those as we go. If you're participating in Spanish, go ahead and put your questions in Spanish or in English, whichever is most comfortable. And I can use Google Translate to take that Spanish question, translate it, and I can read the translation to Leroy and the audience, and then we can go ahead and answer those questions.
Perfect. Thanks, Dave. Again, we really thank everyone for your participation tonight. We welcome the input. We welcome the questions. Again, Dave kind of told you how you can do that. Your comments are critical to the success of this long-term planning effort. Long-range facility planning is critical to the success of our district. While our operating budgets vacillate over the short term, tonight we're going to take a longer term, a longer horizon to look at this. While we're basically building a 10-year plan, we're actually at parts of this plan going to look out 100 years or more. It's important with this kind of long-range planning that we go through this long-range planning because it's easy for a district to find themselves in a situation where if we haven't planned strategically, we may need to replace multiple buildings at once, which will be terribly expensive on our taxpayers. So this kind of strategic planning is really trying to be the most effective and efficient for our taxpayers that also meet the needs and support the success of our Forest Grove students. So with that, I think we're going to go on to the first slide here and get rolling. The district, in 2016, the district hired Malum architects to assist in developing a long-range facility plan. You'll hear from Leroy Landers, who's kind of the chief architect. That's probably not the exact right name, but he's kind of the person in charge of our project, along with some of his other, some of the other folks from Malum here tonight, and he'll introduce those coming up. In a 9-month process, our district leadership, community advisory committee, and broad community outreach, we developed a long-range facility plan in 2017. This plan worked to understand the district's goals, what the facility-related need was. They developed 3 plan proposals that could have been used for a bond at that time. This plan was created with a nod to that we weren't going out for a bond in 2017, that the most logical time to go out for a bond would have been right around 2022. So when we created that plan in 2017, we knew that we were going to have to come back to update it, to take a look at it. And that's kind of what's happening here today, which is we're going back through and is looking at the assumptions that we made in 2017 and then determining which of those are still valid. In why now? Why do we need to do this? There's kind of several things going on here. First, the pandemic has impacted us. Our enrollments were beginning to level off and decrease even before the pandemic, but certainly since the pandemic, we've seen some changes. And so we need to look at those enrollments again and determine what the need is there. facility need has been changing. One of the examples I'm going to give you is that in 2017, when we put together our plans, there was a lot of investment needed for CTE, which would be our career and technical education. Well, since 2017, we received a thing called Measure 98, which has allowed us to make investments in those spaces. And we don't, at this point, we don't need the same kind of investment that we needed in 2017. The third reason why now would be in 2022, the 2005 bond is going to drop off of the rolls. And there's an opportunity there for the community to reinvest and in education. Our buildings last somewhere between, Malin will talk through that most of our buildings can last upwards of 100 years before they have to be replaced. So these investments are over a long period of time, and we're going to need to continue to invest each 10-year period in some portion of our facilities. So there's always going to be a need for our community to be investing in schools. And so the last one right there at the bottom is there is a requirement by the state now that we run a long-range facility plan, just so that every school district is being strategic and that information is being presented to the state so they kind of understand where these districts are at. So with that, I'm going to hand this off to Leroy Landers, and the rest of the team at Malin Architects will be facilitating the rest of this meeting.
Great. Thank you, Dave. Good evening, and thank you all for coming. I just want to reiterate both the welcome and the big thank you to all of you for participating in tonight's presentation, and most importantly, the feedback you give us. This process and your role in it is really, from my perspective, one of the bigger kind of community volunteer efforts that you could undertake as a community member. And because it's going to impact learning in your community, the children in your community. And I really just want to emphasize that the feedback that you give us this evening will be listened to very carefully by the district. And it may very well create some changes in the plans that you see this evening. So your feedback is very, very important. Joining me here this evening are two colleagues, Jennifer Lubin and Elisa Laverifan. We have been working together with the district over the last several months to provide the update. This evening, we have an agenda where we'll take first 10 minutes or so and give you all just a very brief introduction to what a long-range plan is. I know that many of you may not have participated in a planning effort like this before and don't know what the benefit or the purpose of a long-range plan is. So we'll try and cover that very briefly for you, and also discuss the process to develop a plan. That'll be followed by about 10 minutes where Dave will talk briefly about the very high level kind of vision, strategic vision for the district. And then I will share some of the more specific goals and guiding principles that have been established for the long-range plan itself. We'll follow that by a brief section discussing district need. So these are the things that it's essentially a lot of data and information that helps us determine whether or not anything needs to be done with the facilities to better support education. And then that section will be followed by a few other considerations that we want to share with you as you begin to look at and ultimately provide comment on the plan options that we'll be providing at the end of the presentation. As David Warner mentioned, at each of these sections, we'll have about 5 minutes or so for questions specifically associated with that section. So we'll give you a little bit of time there to ask questions about each section. And then at the end of the presentation, we'll hopefully have a bit of time for a bit broader discussion. And then we want to end this evening's meeting with a 5 or 6 question poll, and we'll give you instructions on how to do that at that point in time. So our goals for this evening really are firstly and foremostly to have you understand, you'll see this acronym LRFP here. That stands for Long Range Facility Plan. To understand the Long Range Facility Plan process and the history with it, Dave shared a little bit of the history from the 2016-2017 plan already. To understand the district vision and goals that will be informing the process, we want you to develop a high-level understanding of facility-related need, and after you've sort of seen the various types of need, to take a look at the plan proposals that have been developed. And then again, very importantly, to provide input and feedback based on your individual opinion as a community member, and also really from the standpoint of what you think the rest of your community members might feel about these plan options as well. All right, so first section here is really a brief introduction to the process. So again, for those of you who may not be familiar with what a long-range facility plan is, a simple way and good way to think about it's really kind of two key things. Firstly, it's a comprehensive summary of facility need. So it brings together all of the data that should be considered when determining if there need to be adjustments or modifications or improvements made to facilities. It looks at the district's ability to accommodate educational programs. It also considers the capacity of your schools, individual schools, and also the entire district, and compares those to current enrollment or the number of students that you have in the district, and also enrollment projections for the next 10 years. And those enrollment projections are provided by Portland State University Population Research Center. They provide that service to districts throughout the state of Oregon. And then finally, it helps us pull together all the information associated with the condition of districts, facilities, and sites. So that's the physical condition of the buildings themselves. What repairs might need to be made? Are the repairs so extensive that you might consider replacement? Those sorts of things. Long-range facility plan also serves as a strategic management tool for the district's facilities over time. So with this information in hand, that summary of need, the facts associated with facilities, it is a way to explore what should be done, whether it be modernizations or additions or replacement or new construction. It identifies opportunities for the more efficient use of your sites. As Dave mentioned, the district certainly wants to be using taxpayer money as efficiently as possible, and this plan can help the district assess that and make sure they're doing that. And then it also creates a prioritized capital plan that aligns with community support. And so what this means is that the long-range facility plan often serves as a foundation for a subsequent bond measure proposal. So it creates a framework or some proposed capital or money allocations to address need. So what does a long-range plan do for you, the district and your community? Well, it should provide you information to make well-informed decisions about your school facilities. It allows the school district to coordinate with your local jurisdictions, the city and the county, regarding ongoing development that is happening in your jurisdiction, and to sort of coordinate enrollment and capacity to make sure that there's enough seats in the schools for the amount of construction and development that's happening. It will help you and the district, as Dave mentioned earlier, strategically plan for future facility needs rather than do it at a last minute kind of knee-jerk basis, so to speak. And it will help keep you conformed and hopefully build support towards some of the larger goals regarding education and how facilities can support those goals. Very importantly, it serves to establish an ongoing cycle for keeping your capital investments up to date. That's that sort of recurrent bond measure to address needs over time that Dave mentioned. And it helps you meet a number of different state requirements associated with long-range planning for school districts. And then, of course, very importantly, if it's done well, it will help you avoid doing something with your facilities that you regret. that you have to undo later, because we all know that would be a waste of taxpayer resources or money. So who is involved with the long range plan? We've really been working with three groups of people. The first group is the district steering committee. And this is really comprised of the district leadership. And we have been working with this group for about the last 7 or 8 months to look at the long range facility plan from 2016 to try and assemble all the different bits of data so that it can be assessed, and to determine whether or not the 2017 long range plan needed any sort of adjustment. We've also been working with a focus group, 14 people, and these are your community members. They were identified by the district, and this group of people very graciously volunteered to provide input in several meetings that we have had with them. Much of what they have seen will be what you are seeing actually this evening, and they have provided input along the way that has allowed us to adjust the plan options a little bit. And then finally, our community outreach. So that is everyone here this evening. We also held one previous meeting with your fellow community members as well. And our goal is to have a diverse representation as possible, and to hear from as many voices from your community as possible. And again, your input is very, very important. So let's take a moment and just look at the types of need that may impact decision-making associated with district facilities. We think it's really helpful to begin to think about all the different types of need in sort of 3 key areas. That's educational program, enrollment and capacity, and facility condition. And you can see within each one of these areas, there are a whole lot of considerations that can fall within a given area. So for example, under educational program, it might involve specific programs like kindergarten or pre-kindergarten programs. It might involve physical education, athletics fields, STEM programs, so science, technology programs, special education, career, college and career readiness. So that's the career tech ed that Dave mentioned, and a number of other things. Enrollment and capacity may involve things like growth. We look at the utilization of your facilities. We look at the impact on the boundaries of each individual school and so forth. And then of course, facility condition. And I'll go into each one of these in much greater detail in just a few moments. But from all this information, when we look at that data and we look at it in view of the goals that the community and the district has for learning within your community, and the goals for how your facilities can better support learning, that then leads us to plan options. In other words, what are the things that can be done to your facilities to better support learning in your community? And really what we're after when we look at a long-range facility plan, it really targets this general approach to managing your facilities over time, which is a strategic phased approach. We know that there'll be one part of the work that might be completed in the first 6 or 8 or 10-year period, and there will be a second phase where additional work will need to happen and so forth. What we're trying to avoid is really a what might be considered a Band-Aid approach, or it's really a reactive approach where no plan, no strategic plan exists. And we also realize that no district can afford to fix all of the issues in every facility that they have. And so that's why we really need to take a very phased, incremental approach to planning for facilities. And what it begins to come down to is really trying to understand for each one of those phases what the balance is between prioritized need that might be in different categories. This is just an example. It could involve additions to existing schools that need to be made to provide additional seats or capacity. It might involve renovations that need to be made, or perhaps new schools that need to be constructed. And balance that prioritized need against the amount of capital support money that the district community is able to provide. That's very, very important, because we know that resources are not limited, and this plan has to be very sensitive to that support. So as we walk through this presentation, there are a few things we'd like you to keep in mind. Firstly, we're still in the process of developing a plan, and what that means is that some of the input that you give us tonight could very well create some adjustments to the plans, and we're hoping that it helps us land on a single plan that makes the most sense in view of what the community sort of feels they can support. Please also understand that we might not be able to answer every question that you have this evening, and where we're unable to answer the questions, we'll do our best to go away, find the answer, and get back to you if we can. Our primary interest tonight is to hear from you, and that's why that last kind of half an hour or so at the end of this is so important. And the first section of this, we're going to be giving you a lot of data, so I apologize ahead of time for that, but it's very important for you to have this background in order for you to give us well-informed input. The superintendent will take that advice, the information you're giving us, and make recommendations to the school board. And remember that what we're proposing tonight is not in any way a promise. These right now are just possible ideas that will help develop the plan. So with regard to that first section, if anyone has any questions at this point for maybe the next 5 minutes or so, I'm happy to answer any that I am able. And I may rely on Dave or other district members to also assist in any questions that you may have.
Yeah, so far, no questions, Leroy.
Okay. We'll give people a minute or so to think. And if there aren't any questions, then I'll just move on to the next section, which is completely fine. Okay, why don't I move on to the next section?
Actually, one question just popped in.
Okay. Yep.
When did this process start?
I'll answer that question in two pieces. The original plan, the first plan that we're basically looking at updating, began in early 2016. And we met with a group of your community members over the course of 9 months at that time. The plan report was completed in early 2017 after we took time to document it. The update process started approximately 8 months ago or so. And so we have been working with the district leadership on a biweekly basis, basically, and in certain parts of it a weekly basis, and have met with over that, it's sort of in the middle section of that 8 months, with the focus group over a series of short meetings to get their input. Okay. Seeing no more questions, I will go on to the next section. All right. We'd like to just really briefly touch on the vision and goals for this effort, because it's really important to understand these. Again, the need, you can think of it as a number of facts, and it's really this section, the vision and goals, which really informs anyone looking at these facts on what, if anything, to do, because this whole plan really has to be driven by district and community vision and goals. And Dave will start with kind of a high-level district strategic plan.
Yeah, over my first 2 years in the district, we held over 50 community meetings. And at these meetings, we sat down and asked you, what did you want to see from graduates? What kind of skills did you want them to have? What kind of values did you want them to hold after they left our school system? And what came out of those 50 community meetings and thousands of conversations and input, they kind of coalesced into three basic areas, what we call our maxims. The first one was care deeply. And the key part here was, as we heard in these community meetings, it was about, we kept hearing they wanted us to build communities of students, communities of parents and students. And so this whole piece about caring deeply is one of our deeply held maxims. The second thing we heard from our community meetings was they wanted our students to be resilient. And as they left our system, to be able to handle the rigors of being in our society today. And so it was really around, how do we build resilient students, stand strong, build resilient students. The third thing was, I should say on the second one, there was a lot about, we heard a lot from parents in the community about making sure that kids were ready to manage their finances, to be able to deal with how to organize and how to be prepared. It was interesting, but there was a lot of things that aren't necessarily school-based right now that they wanted us to begin to build into schools. And the last was adapt and grow, which is create students who can rigorously learn, who in our society now, the information is in our phones and on our computers, but how you use that information is different. So those are kind of the overriding kind of our three maxims that we're working on right now. I know Leroy is going to kind of head into some more specifics around what were the strategic aims of this plan.
Thank you, Dave. And I do want to emphasize that just the point, this effort, again, that we're looking at here is facility focused. So we're really looking at buildings, school buildings and sites. That's what we're focusing on. And the key point that I would like to add to this is that sort of an obvious point is that the district and your community does not build schools just because you like to spend tax money and build buildings. You are doing it for a very specific purpose, and that purpose is to support learning in your community. You are supporting your children, and that is the idea behind this entire plan. How can your facilities better support learning in your community and support your community? So with regard to that, back in 2017, and again, working with your community members over the course of about 9 months or so, one of the things that came out of that effort were a series of guiding principles that were developed to really guide plan development, plan alternative developments. These are the things that could be used as touchstones. People could go back and say, are the plans that we're talking about here achieving these guiding principles? They included providing flexible school facilities that foster creativity and support high quality education and offer career pathways. It was strongly felt that the schools should reflect cultural diversity of the district and promote the success of all students within the district. That community group felt that it was important that the plan address safety, security, and seismic issues. It was also determined that the plan and the district had to plan for growth. So as your number of students in the district increased, make sure the plan allowed the district to accommodate them through adequate capacity. It was felt that the buildings and the plan should support green initiatives and create energy efficient facilities. So that would also help, of course, reduce operational costs over time. The idea of neighborhood schools was valued. The community group we work with felt it was important to protect the investment in your current facilities by addressing unfunded maintenance needs. So this is basically saying you need to make sure you're repairing and maintaining the facilities that you've already invested in when you built them. The plan should provide upgrades and improvements in every school. So it's not to say it's equally across schools. It's based on need, the differing need at each school, but every school should see some benefit. And then finally, strategically maintain, modernize, and replace facilities within the context of a long-range facility plan. And we'll talk a little bit more about that later when we look at the plan options. I wanted to show a couple of slides too that really outlined some planning goals that were identified by the community group that we worked with. And there were many, many goals that were established, and we asked the community group to prioritize those goals, to vote on which ones they felt were most important. And then we grouped those goals into, this is our team really grouping them now, group those goals into similar areas of consideration. So they, as you can see, there were a group of goals directly associated with instruction and learning, and there were 19 votes. So that was, of course, the highest priority that was established by the group. There were a series of goals that were established associated with growth. So that is enrollment and capacity. And you can see the number of votes distributed across these goals. A number of votes associated with goals around diversity, goals around partnerships, goals around sustainability. So these are energy efficiency, green buildings, goals around safety, goals around career education. So these will, you'll see this acronym CTE later. So career technical education. Goals around special programs. So dedicated special education facilities and so forth. Goals around the role of facilities as supporting a community. Goals associated with equity, fiscal responsibility, some goals established directly associated with pre-kindergarten programs, the concept of developing a positive, welcoming learning environment that fosters pride, and then a goal around teacher support. So a place where teachers can go to kind of step back and take a breath. The board also has a series of key goals that they have established. They include maintaining small class size in the district, providing alternative school options for students who want or need a non-traditional learning environment, and supporting more pre-kindergarten in the district. And we'll talk about these as we go through plan options in a bit. So with that, we can take a few minutes, and if anyone has any questions specifically associated with vision and goals, I'll do my best to answer them. And if not, in a minute or so, we can move to the next section.
So far, no questions.
Okay. And I'll give you the offer if later on in the presentation you have a question about one of the previous sections, please feel free to ask that question then.
We did have one just pop up. You mentioned special programs. Does this include our dual language program?
Absolutely. We're committed to our dual language programs as it's in another place of in our strategic planning, but we're absolutely committed to continuing and expanding dual language.
Thank you, David.
One more.
Mm-hmm.
Does alternative education include an online option?
Yeah, and I'll talk about kind of alternative education coming up, but just so that everybody knows, we are already looking into an online option for next year, taking from what we learned from our experience this year and expanding on that. So we'll be coming out with something there too.
How high of a level for dual language is a follow-up to that?
Currently, our dual language goes through high school. Our kids can now, when they leave the high school program, they can actually leave with enough credits to get a minor in Spanish without taking any classes at Pacific. They can basically go to Pacific and automatically qualify for a minor. So our program goes through high school.
Okay, I'll move on to the next section. And again, if you have a question about vision and goals, please feel free to answer it at the end of the next sections. All right, we'll move on to a section of district need. And just kind of open up with a just high overview of the district itself for those of you who may not be familiar with some of the statistics. Here you see an outline of the district boundary and the location of various facilities within the district clustered around Forest Grove, of course. So the district serves families in Forest Grove, Dilley, Gales Creek, and Cornelius. And there are more than 5,800 students in the district. District is comprised of 13 school facilities, including 6 neighborhood elementary schools, an upper elementary, 1 middle school, a high school, and alternative schools. Covering the first area of need and talking about some of the specific programs, Dave will open this section and talk about each program.
Perfect. These are the educational needs that were outlined in the 2017 study. And so I wanted to walk through kind of where we sit with them today. The first one would be preschool. We have a really high need for quality preschool programs. We're seeing with these programs that we're currently hosting, just how important it is for students to have access to quality pre-K. Students who graduate from our pre-K programs are more than ready for kindergarten. They exit our pre-K program knowing how to read words at a kindergarten or above level, know how to write 2 sentences independently and accurately. They know their numbers from 1 to 30. Many of them know numbers 1 to 100 and how to add numbers. They are role models to the students who didn't have that same opportunity. Their parents are more connected to our schools and participate more in our school events and volunteer more. So this has become a priority for us to continue to expand pre-K. There's a lot of work going on at the state level and in Washington County to do even more work on expanding this. So this is a very big field for us right now. The second topic there is alternative. In a 2,000 student high school like Forest Grove is, there's a lot of students who need an alternative experience. Currently, we host our alternative school in the first floor of our maintenance and transportation building. This is a vastly inferior space for the district to host that learning. I'll tell you, they do an amazing job. So this isn't any comment about the teaching or the learning that's going on there. It just isn't a great space to host that option. Alternative schooling isn't just one thing. Our students who are at risk have many stories. Each one is unique. To think of this one high school experience could meet the needs of all of those kids is just, it's not right. That's not what we should be doing. Alternative schools that are effective are more like layers of support. For our students who need to work, we run programs after school. For our students who just need a different way of learning, have a different way of learning, we run a day program that does things differently. I think the thing that we have, the possibility that we have in creating this new alt school is we can build it close to our real high school. And then we can begin to merge the programs so that kids get their needs met with maybe different instruction, can still get back to the high school to take part in the cabinetry class or the Viking house or culinary or PE. And again, for me, when I think about these alt schools, they're more like layers than a single thing. We desperately need to build a space that can function properly as a host for that. we have an opportunity to do something that a lot of other programs haven't been able to do, to blur these lines between what is alternative and what's traditional. Students at the alt school getting core instruction and heading over for PE, this would be really, I think, game changing for a lot of our students. So this alternative high school piece has become a real high priority for us. The other three areas here, I think, are kind of lesser needs for us at this point. We are looking to create an alternative space at NAMS. Right now, we believe we can do that outside of this 10-year bond funding. CTE improvements, I think we've made great improvements in many spaces. Mechatronics, the new welding shop, the cabinetry shop, the culinary spaces, we've used Measure 98 to pay for those pieces. We still need some investment in mechatronics. It's a new program that is basically helping our kids get trained and then get entry into very high-paying jobs in the valley here around Intel and the other semiconductor industries. But we still feel like we can do that through Measure 98. The last one is there was a new law passed several years ago around increasing PE requirements. At the K-6 level, we believe we have the number of facilities so that we can meet the law. There's still some changes we need to make. At the 9-12 level, we also feel like we have the right facilities to be able to meet the law. At the middle school, there's some challenges for us there. But again, we believe the changes that we need to make in those facilities we'll do outside of this bond process. And so those are kind of the main focuses besides just the other things that Leroy is going to talk about, which is we have capacity issues and we need different types of schools.
Great. Thank you, Dave. I wanted to add one other point that we consider when we're looking at educational programs, and that is a topic of educational adequacy. What this really means is that we look at what, if any, improvements might be made at older schools to equitably align them with some of the district's newer schools, which have a more modern learning environment in them. And these two photographs kind of illustrate visually what I'm kind of talking about. Is it's very typical in districts throughout the country, really, that have buildings of a certain age, constructed during the 30s, 1940s, 1950s, 60s, to have a situation where you have classrooms off a corridor. And in today's modern teaching options, there's a lot of instruction that actually takes place outside of the classroom. So here you see an example of students being instructed in the corridor, and modern learning facilities are really designed to try and accommodate that diversity of learning spaces or learning environments. And so we ask this question: how well does the facility create a successful environment for learning, inspiring, and building community? So here is our last slide associated with educational programs, and we wanted to leave you with a few takeaways that start to apply some approximate estimated costs needed to address some of the educational programs or needs that we have just shared with you. So for early childhood education, this is the pre-K programs that Dave was talking about, happening at 3 elementary schools. The projected cost to make modifications and or additions to those schools to accommodate the pre-K programs is about $4.8 million. Under alternative education, so this is the alternative education facility at the high school level that would replace the existing classrooms in the transportation and maintenance building. That estimated cost to provide that facility, a new facility, is $21.5 million. The alternative education modifications at the middle school that Dave made reference to is approximately $2 million. And this particular area is, again, one of the areas that the district believes they might be able to make some modifications there outside any dollars that are identified in this long-range plan. So they're looking at ways to address this now outside of the plan. Career technical education at the high school level. Dave mentioned that this has already had a number of improvements made since the 2017 long-range plan because of state funding that became available. The remaining changes that need to be made are projected at around $13 million, but the district has some ideas on how they might be able to address the facilities to better serve career technical education and possibly outside this long-range facility plan itself. Physical education improvements, this would be at the middle school level. We're estimating about $3 million to make those changes. And this is another line item where the district believes they might be able to make some improvements or changes that will allow them to meet the state requirements without having to allocate money from this plan to make those changes. And then educational adequacy, this would be district-wide improvements at the elementary level. We're projecting somewhere around $9 million if you were to start to try and bring some of your older schools, just in terms of their variety of learning, types of learning spaces, into closer alignment with the newer facilities. We'll now move to our second area of need, which involves the condition of your facilities. So this is related to age, maintenance, repair, and so forth. One of the first characteristics that we look at when we come in and assess district facilities is just their age. We look at how old they are. This doesn't necessarily mean that all of your older facilities are in poor shape. However, the age of a facility can sometimes give you an indication of what might need to be replaced either now or in the short foreseeable future. And so it's really looking at what the expected life cycle of a building might be, particularly a school building. Many districts that we have worked with, they strike a line in the sand, so to speak, and establish a certain expectation or a baseline expectation for what their facilities should be from the standpoint of age. And that sometimes varies from 60 to 80 years, maybe even more. For purposes of this plan, we're looking at facilities, if they are more than 70 years old, you might consider looking at them closely to assess what their condition is, to see if they may be reaching a point where replacement might be a logical approach. And I'll just draw your attention very quickly to the yellow bars, which indicate the age of each of these facilities. So Cornelius Elementary School, you see, is 76 years old now. Dilley Elementary School is 79. Harvey Clark is 72. Oak Grove is 73. And the Central Administration Building is 90 years old. But we go far deeper into assessment of the condition of facilities. The district hired a third-party facility assessor. The facility assessor used the state template for facility assessment, and this template basically scores all of the different systems associated with each individual school and its site. The number that comes out of this template, so each site was visited by this assessor. The assessor spent time walking around, getting on roofs, looking at all the exterior walls and windows, all the interiors. That yields a score, which is commonly referred to as FCI, which stands for Facility Condition Index. The Facility Condition Index is a score that represents the estimated cost to repair deficiencies at a given school site as a percentage of the replacement cost. So for example, Cornelius Elementary School, the higher the number, the worse the condition the facility is. So Cornelius Elementary School, it's estimated that to repair deficiencies of that existing facility as defined by FCI would be 39% of its replacement cost. There are categories that are on the right-hand side. I'll bring your attention to categories that are generally industry-like standards, which give you an idea of how these scores relate. So if a building is less than 5% of replacement cost, it's considered in good condition. If it's 5 to 10% of replacement cost to repair it, it is considered fair. If it is 10 to 30%, so you can see it's a pretty broad range, it's considered to be in poor, varying ranges of poor. And if it's above 30% of replacement, it's considered unsatisfactory. And for many districts, they begin to consider whether or not replacement of that facility may make sense in the long term. So the 4 facilities that are in your worst condition are Cornelius, Dilley Elementary, Oak Grove Elementary, and the Central Administration's building. And you can see a direct correlation of those scores with the building's age. When all of the costs associated with addressing deficiencies district-wide are added up, the projected cost to address those deficiencies is approximately $112 million. We have a couple of slides just to show you a few photographs of facilities. These are the types of conditions that are being assessed and scored as the assessor walks around. And so here you see just repair that would be needed in exterior brick walls, damage to an older building and its brick wall, probably due to settlement, structural settlement, or perhaps thermal expansion. You can also see the older window here, dry rot conditions, old play equipment, water damage due to roofs that need to be repaired. This is showing accessibility. So if someone has limited mobility, there are places in your facilities that don't allow for appropriate levels of accessibility. Older restroom facilities that need repair. Mechanical equipment that is aging on rooftops, some of which it is old enough that it's becoming difficult to find replacement parts. This shows a retrofit of technology in an existing building to provide space for cabling and technical runs, technology runs, and then aging electrical equipment. So you can see it's quite old, and again, very difficult to get replacement parts for. Now, I want to stress here that the photographs you're looking at are in no way any sort of a comment about how well the buildings are being taken care of, or whether or not the facilities department is doing their job in maintaining facilities. What you're looking at is just normal wear and tear over time. Your facilities are actually very well taken care of, and the facilities department is doing an excellent job using the resources they have from the operational funds. But equipment gets old and ultimately needs to be replaced. We also look at some very specific line items for maintenance. The district maintains a list of known issues that need to be addressed on a site-by-site basis. And what you're looking at is a breakdown of what those issues fall into, what category they fall into. So the total deferred maintenance coming off the district's line item list, their 10-year line item list, is about $45 million. you can see that the majority of that falls under mechanical, electrical, and plumbing, and also repair to the exterior building envelope, which means these are components on the building like roof repair or window repair or replacement, or repairing the exterior walls on a building, and then a number of other categories. So food, services, custodial, fire and life safety, interior finishes, and then the site, the facility grounds and parking lots. And we look at the facility condition at each individual site, breaking out each of those categories. So we can understand from a fire and life safety standpoint, here you see in red, approximately how much capital would be required to address the 10-year deferred maintenance items at each individual site. And here you can see Cornelius has got quite a number of issues associated with the exterior building envelope. And then also here you see the mechanical and plumbing. No surprise, the largest areas of need are Neil Armstrong and Forest Grove for maintenance, but much of that is simply driven by the size of the buildings themselves. They're much larger in square footage than an elementary school. We also take a look at seismic considerations. Back in 2006, the state conducted a FEMA rapid visual screening for every school facility across the state. And what you're looking at is a chart for Forest Grove school facilities. The orange boxes are high risk, considered high risk. And so you can see that a number of your elementary schools as of 2006, this is the latest screening that has been conducted, were considered high risk. Harvey Clark is also considered high risk. Portions of Neil Armstrong and portions of the high school were all considered high risk. And what that means is that those schools were scored as having a high chance of collapse in a 2,500-year seismic event. So this is the major seismic event, the Cascadia event, that occurs every 2,000 to 2,500 years. Our estimated cost, if you were to look at making all the seismic improvements across the district, is that cost could easily exceed $75 million to make all of those seismic improvements district-wide. We know that there are a number of technology and security upgrades that should also be made at various district facilities. These include security and surveillance and access control improvements and upgrades, and the cost for that is about $400,000. There are also classroom audio-visual equipment replacements at a cost of approximately $3.8 million. And then the district dark fiber installation, which is estimated at being approximately $2.3 million. So the total technology and security related costs are $6.5 million. So the takeaways for this second section, the facility condition section, is that 4 district facilities are in critical condition based on their FCI score exceeding 30% or more. And they are also more than 70 years old, those 4 schools. Those are Cornelius Elementary School, Dilley Elementary School, Oak Grove Academy, and the Central Administration Building. There are also 2 other facilities that are close to critical condition, and they are both over 50 years old. These are Neil Armstrong Middle School and Harvey Clark Elementary School. The total deferred maintenance for all district facilities, so this is the district line item list for each of the sites, is estimated to be approximately $45 million. With the greatest need at Neil Armstrong and the high school, again, largely due just simply because of their size. and other facility condition related deficiencies are estimated to be an additional $112 million. Based on the 2006 rapid visual screening that was completed by this state organization right here, Dogami, it's a state department. There are 4 elementary schools, the middle school, and high school that have greater than 10% of collapse in a 2,500-year seismic event. And district-wide, there is approximately $6.5 million of improvements associated with technology and security. So a lot of line items. And I know these are a lot of numbers to follow, but we'll pull them all together for you as you see the plans in just a few minutes. We're now going to touch on the third and final area of facility need, and this involves capacity. So how many seats are available to students at each school in the district and also district-wide. And we will compare that to enrollment. So the number of students that are in the school, in the district now, and the projection for growth over the next 10 years. So here you can see the varying capacity of the elementary schools compared to the target capacity of what might be termed a ideal elementary school as defined by your district, Forest Grove School District. So the target capacity of an elementary school is 500 students, and you can see that some of the students, or some of the facilities, Echo Shaw, Harvey Clark, are at that or near that capacity, and other schools are under that capacity to varying degrees. The middle school and the upper elementary, you can see the target capacity here. So Tom McCall Upper Elementary School is within that. Neil Armstrong is actually greater than that target capacity. They have 1,260 capacity. And then the high school is well within the maximum target capacity for the high school. So that just gives you sort of a feel of where the schools sit relative to an ideal target size, so to speak. This chart is really where we begin to compare the number of seats in a given school, its capacity, to enrollment, the number of students there and projected to be there. And what you're looking at are the gold bars that you see here represent the current enrollment at the school. So for example, Cornelius Elementary School has 361 students currently plus 20 pre-K students for a total of 381 students. The blue bar is the projected capacity 10 years from now at each of the schools. So here you can see Cornelius Elementary is projected to significantly increase its enrollment. Its enrollment, the number of students in the school. So there will be significantly more students, approximately 478 students in Cornelius. The 2 horizontal bars at each school site represent the permanent building capacity. So this is the actual physical building, and then this includes modular or portable capacity. So the existing building has 322 seats. If you count all the modulars, it has 437 seats. And the important thing to see from this chart is that several of your schools, Cornelius Elementary School, to a smaller extent, Dilley, Harvey Clark, to a very significant extent, and Joseph Gale are all projected to be over their total capacity. So that suggests that for the next 10 years, it may be necessary or appropriate to add capacity or seats, more seats for students in your district. And that's something that we're going to be looking at in plan development. At the upper elementary school, you can see there is no problem. Your enrollment is well within your capacity. Neil Armstrong, there's no problem. Your enrollment now and projected, very little increase, is well within the capacity. In Forest Grove High School, today and 10 years from now will be well within the existing capacity. So the only problems based on current projections from Portland State University exist at the elementary level. So here are the key takeaways from this enrollment and capacity section. It's important to understand the changes since 2017. The permanent district capacity, so this is capacity in the brick and mortar schools, not counting modulars, is lower than in 2017, particularly at the elementary schools. This decrease in capacity is due to changes in class size. So the district has decided to have fewer students in classrooms, which reduces its capacity, classroom utilization, and the number of classrooms for general education. Projected enrollment, the number of students coming to the district over the next 10 years, is also lower than in 2017, and particularly at the elementary. This is due to changes in the calculations that Portland State University has provided, and also the number of preschool classrooms that have been targeted by the district. So in 2017, the district was targeting district-wide preschool being added, but phased in. And this plan updates it to really targeting just 3 schools where preschool would be added to those sites. However, and this is the real great and important takeaway from enrollment and capacity, by 2033-34, so that's the end of our 10-year horizon line for this plan, the district is projected to be over capacity at the elementary level. So it will be 306 over its permanent capacity, or 99 students over its total capacity at the elementary level. So that's something that this plan really needs to look at and address. On the east side, your elementary schools are 97 students over your permanent capacity. So there'll be 97 more students than you have permanent capacity. However, you have enough modulars or portable facilities on the east side to still accommodate them. The students will be housed in portables. Cornelius is a particular point of concern on the east side in that it will be 156 students over its permanent capacity and 41 students over its total capacity. Even if you count the portable space there, they will still have 41 more students than can be seated. On the west side, there's even more significant overage, 209 over the permanent capacity, or 117 students over the total capacity on the west side. Harvey Clark and Joe Gale are the big areas of concern. You saw it on the bar graph, with Harvey Clark being 126 students over its permanent capacity and 80 students over its total capacity. So even when all the modulars are full, you will still have 80 too many students at Harvey Clark. At Joe Gale, 70 students over permanent and 24 students over its total capacity. So I know that that's a lot of numbers to be sort of processing. I think it's the simplest way is to just sort of be thinking about capacity need at the elementary level. Something should likely need to be done to accommodate students over the next 10 years. At the upper elementary and middle, you're fine. And at the high school, you're fine. So if there are any questions, I see some.
Yeah, we have a couple here. First one is, please can you outline why some of the costs associated with program improvements, example, PE, alternative education, are so high, all in the millions of dollars? These seem astronomical amounts to me, but perhaps if you describe exactly what one would be getting for spending, say, $3.2 million on PE improvements, with examples that might make more realistic to me. Note, when it comes to the facility building costs, I have a better understanding of why these costs can escalate.
Right.
Hopefully that makes sense to you.
It does. Yeah. Yeah. So yes, I would agree that the dollars associated with any construction work are always, I think they're staggeringly high. I'm always kind of shocked at how expensive things are to build or to change. For the physical education facilities, just to use that as an example, the current thought, kind of the district's thinking has been that there is adequate capacity at Neil Armstrong. In fact, there's additional capacity which would allow them to modify some of their existing spaces for physical education. And we don't know exactly what modifications would be made because there have been no designs that would really indicate how extensive the modifications are. And so the way in which we went into estimating the approximate cost is we looked at the approximate square footage of the existing spaces being discussed as potential reuse spaces. And we took the square footage of those spaces and we compared current construction costs in today's dollars. So, and we, based on those construction costs, we developed a cost for modernization, so a cost per square foot. But then we have to take those costs and we have to escalate them out to when the work might actually be done. And that work, assuming you might go out for a bond 1 or 2 years from now, just projecting that as a possibility, that work might not be done for another 3 or even 4 years after that. And so the escalation of the costs really causes the dollar value for each one of them, for each one of the line items. Now, I did want to make one other kind of key point is for any of the costs that we're looking at when we're projecting potential costs, no matter what the line item is, we really work to strike a balance that allows us to establish a cost that is conservative enough to cover, once any of the projects are designed, to cover the actual costs when the construction happens, but not overly conservative. In other words, we try not to create a number that is overly conservative and incorrect. But what we want to make sure of as best as we can is that there's an accurate estimate that will accommodate the true construction cost. And they are a lot of money. I know that, yes. I don't know if that answered the question or not, but.
Okay, we have 2 more. I assume this can only be funded by a levy. How does passing a levy work when dealing with 2 cities, Forest Grove and Cornelius? Can we get enough funding to replace the buildings needing replaced?
Dave, do you want me to take that, or?
I can grab that. So
Okay.
it wouldn't be a levy. It would end up being a capital bond, and the bond would go across both cities. And so that won't really be, it's happened before. We passed several other bonds. And so you're going to get an opportunity to look at some of the proposals we have and talk about which buildings do you feel we should replace, which buildings should we build new. And so we'll kind of, I'm going to hold on that one and let you actually get to the plans eventually here, where you can kind of give us feedback on what you feel would be the best solution there. And then while I'm talking, Juliana said, okay, to understand NAM's capacity, it's modified space. Does that mean putting up new walls somewhere? I'm not sure I understand the question, Juliana. If we're talking about the one modified, like creating a modified space for some alternative schooling, it would mean some substantial rework of a classroom. If you meant something else, hit me with another question, and then I'll pipe in.
The one comment I would add to, just in terms of a clarification of the bond point, is this: if it is determined by the school board that it makes sense to propose that a bond measure be put forth to the public for a vote, which is, certainly not a absolute given at this point, but let's assume they did, that would be for general obligation bonds, which can be used for very specific things. They cannot be used for operational. You can't hire teachers with that money. What you can do is it's really used for work on facilities and sites. It can be used for things like curriculum. So, but you can purchase books with it or replace buses with the money. But you can't use it to pay for employment. That it really comes from an entirely different funding source.
So Juliana had a little bit more clarification. She said, I would like to know how the capacity was calculated, because I can't picture how we could fit over 1,000 people in at NAMS. That's what I would like to understand better. Thanks, Mr.
Right.
Parker.
So I can take that. So the way we calculate capacity is we look at the building plan, the floor plan of the building, and we look at all of the number of classrooms in that floor plan. We determine which classrooms are general education classrooms, and for those classes, we apply a student count for each of the classrooms, and the school district identifies what the number of students are, the target number of students that they want us to apply at each grade level. We then also look at the number of more specialized classrooms, and those are not included in the capacity count, although with some specific instances they are. So it's really a multiplication problem of a number of classrooms times the number of target students in each classroom that establishes what the capacity of that school is. Now, what we know is that that is an ideal capacity. We recognize that some classes have a fewer count of students in terms of true enrollment, and some classes, depending on popularity or scheduling, may have more students in a classroom. So there is some variation level there, but the capacity is really a fixed calculated number, and that's how we arrive at it. One other factor I should apply to, it goes a little bit deeper into the detail, but depending on the grade level, we also apply a utilization factor. So we assume that at an elementary level, general classrooms are utilized 100% of the time. And as you go into the upper grade levels, because of electives and that sort of thing, we realize and calculate into the formula a lower level of utilization, depending on what grade level we're actually talking about. I hope that helped clarify how we get at capacity.
That's all we have right now, Leroy.
Okay, well, let's move on to the next section. And again, if you have questions later about this area, please don't hesitate to ask. Okay, just a couple quick slides before we get into the actual plans themselves. These are a few other considerations that we thought would be useful for you to see prior to reviewing the plan alternatives. And we're going to start with community feedback that we received from 2017. So when the original long-range facility plan was developed over 2016 and 2017, we went through a similar process where we held community outreach meetings like this evening. Those meetings were held physically at schools in the district, and people came to cafeterias and gymnasiums to participate in them. And we provided a similar presentation of need, and we asked people of the types of need that they saw, what, in their opinion, as a community member and a taxpayer, was the most important to address. And what they told us is that it was most important to address, firstly and foremostly, the 10-year deferred maintenance needs at the schools. So this is, you can think of this as maintaining the investment, the capital investment that you've already made, taking care of things. They also felt that it would be important at that time to build a new elementary to address enrollment growth that was projected to happen in the district. So that was the second priority of capital expenditure. The third was that one of your older existing elementary schools should be replaced. That was another priority for the group of people in 2017. CTE programs, the career tech programs, were seen as a priority at that time. Providing modernization to the facilities, so the learning environment improvements beyond 10-year maintenance was a priority. Replacing or modernizing Neil Armstrong was also discussed, and expanding pre-kindergarten programs was discussed, and then finally improving instructional space here. We did a poll of our the community members that came out in the evenings and visited with us. It's very similar to the poll that you'll be taking this evening. Here are 3 questions of several we asked them. We asked the community members at that time whether or not the district should adopt a long-range plan that included a major school project in it. So major meaning like a new school or a major modernization or a replacement, a big project every 8 to 10 years. And if so, why? 98% of the people in the outreach session said yes, the district should consider adopting a plan that looked at a major project every 10 years. We also asked them if they thought that the district should consider a capital measure in 2021. So they were looking out into the future at that time. And if so, what amount would they support? And we provided them 3 plan proposals, one for $68 million, one for $90 million, and one for $102 million. And of those 3 plan proposals, the $90 million proposal and the way it struck a balance between taxation or community support in the form of dollars and prioritized need seemed to be the most appropriate plan approach in 47% of people's eyes. Then we asked them if there were anything missing that they saw in the plan proposals, and they brought up a list of additional safety items they thought would be important. So door cameras, safety improvements, some athletic improvements that they would like to see in the plan, the discussion about replacing Neil Armstrong, looking at grade reconfigurations as part of the plan, considering technology. So you'll see that in the plan improvements we're going to be seeing tonight, and then other playground improvements. Any questions regarding feedback that we received from the 2017 plans before we dive into the updated plan approaches? Okay, so let's move on to the plan section. So long-range facility plan options. This is the area we'll be asking for feedback on. We thought it would be useful to take a couple of slides up front and just remind you, as we're talking about potential bond measures and capital plans, of recent work that's been done in your district. And we just took the two most recent bond measures to illustrate that and remind you of the facility improvements and new construction that's happened coming out of efforts very similar to tonight. So in the year 2000, your community passed a bond, and there were a series of new and replacement schools that came out of that bond measure, including Fern Hill and Tom McCall, East and West. A number of the deferred maintenance items were addressed at that time. Safety and security improvements were made, and also exterior upgrades, so playground equipment, athletic fields, and parking lots. In 2010, your community passed another bond measure, so 10 years later, and that included the replacement of Joe Gale Elementary School, and it included additions and renovations at the high school, at Harvey Clark, and at Neil Armstrong. It addressed some additional deferred maintenance items and made some safety and security upgrades. So a lot of successes and a lot of good work was done in improving the learning environments in the last two bond measures. And so here you see, looking at, this is a timeline now in 10-year increments, and here are your school facilities, the core school facilities. And you can see in 2000 that Fern Hill was replaced, so it's 0 years old. It's a brand new school. Tom McCall, they're brand new schools, so their age is 0. And in 2010, Joe Gale was replaced, and so at a new school, it was 0 years of age. What we're showing you in this chart is something to be considered as you're looking at the plans. And what we're looking at are the age of each of these facilities and where we are today. So right now, Dilly is approximately 80 years old, 79 years old, and Cornelius is right about the same age. And so you can see what we're sort of asking the question of is, should you look at doing something about your old facilities in a phased fashion? And what we're illustrating here is, if nothing is done with the facilities over time, you slowly start to build up more and more facilities that are getting quite old, over 100 years old. And if nothing continues to be done with your facilities over time, you start to develop a pretty significant backlog of very old facilities. And at some point in time, it will become very difficult and critical for the community to really manage and take care of or replace all of the facilities that have really aged. And so this is really sort of asking the question on a phase by phase basis, every sort of 8 or 10 year cycles, should this a larger project be undertaken specifically with regard to potential replacement of your older schools. So as we look at these plan approaches, you're going to be seeing several recurrent components that are included in different mixes of the plan approaches we're going to share with you. You're going to see inclusion of the expanded preschool program. This is a program that turns up in every one of the plans you're going to see tonight. And the dollar amount associated with it, again, is $4.8 million. You will see in some of the plan proposals, not all of the plan proposals, a new alternative high school, which will provide new and expanded standalone alternative education facility to house 150 students. And both of these align with some of the goals established by the board. That alternative high school, again, is approximately $21 million. You will see in all of the plans some amount of money being allocated to deferred maintenance. And so remember, the total 10-year deferred maintenance, this is the line item list of the district, is estimated to be approximately $45 million. Each of the plans will allocate a percentage of that deferred maintenance, and that percentage you'll see is consistent across all plans. In some of the plans, you will see a proposal to replace Cornelius Elementary School, and the cost for that is approximately $65 million. In all of the plans, you will see, when we compare them side by side, an allocation of money associated with technology and security upgrades. In some of the plans, you will see a proposal for a new elementary school that will house 300 students to address the enrollment and capacity issues that you saw in the need section of the presentation. And that 300 student school is projected to be approximately $48 million. You will also see in some of the plans another way to address capacity, which is a classroom addition at Fern Hill Elementary. Fern Hill was designed to accommodate an additional 7 classrooms, so it was planned to allow that to happen. Doing that addition would add approximately 160 seats at just under $11 million. So I'm going to roll out this spreadsheet, which will show you a whole lot of numbers, but I'm going to kind of walk you through the high-level overview of what you're looking at, and then we're going to focus on just a few things within the spreadsheet. So this is just to give you an overview of the need. So here you see the need as it was identified in 2017, and as it has been identified, because things change a little bit, in 2021. And the blue boxes are areas of consistency between areas of need. These columns represent the 3 plan approaches that were put forth to your community for input and developed by a community advisory committee in 2017. So the approaches, as you may recall, were for a $68 million approach, a $90 million approach. You can see we're adding capacity to the school, to the district, and a $102 million approach. These columns represent adjustments, different plan approach adjustments to the 2017 plan. The plan adjustments that have been discussed have varied from an absolute minimal approach, which only looked at maintenance of your existing facilities and adding classrooms at Fern Hill to address some of the capacity issues. And you can see doing that is about $45 million. All the way to the other end of the spectrum that did a number of major projects, including a proposal to replace Neil Armstrong Middle School, which is significantly higher, $191 million. Subsequent to these discussions, they should say the green items, C, D, and E, were plan approaches that the district leadership committee and conversations with the focus group sort of identified as striking perhaps the best balance between addressing the facility need that has been identified and doing it within an overall cost that might possibly be supported by the community. So an $89 million approach, 122 and 173. Subsequent to these discussions, an additional plan proposal was discussed. And so what we're going to be doing is we're going to focus you on these 3 red boxes. So I'm going to take this information and we really are going to focus you in on these 3 boxes and get your input based on these plan approaches, particularly the green boxes, which you're going to see in about 2 slides. You'll see this recreated here. And I'm going to jump forward so you can see it. So here will be those 3 boxes. Here is the 1 box here. Here is a box and a box. So I'll come back to that slide in just a moment. Before we look at these plan approaches, we think it's very useful for you to understand debt. And early at the beginning of this presentation, one of the reasons that Dave pointed out why this plan is being updated now is that current existing district bond debt is sunsetting, meaning it's going away in the next couple of years. And these, I'd like to draw your attention to these 3 points. The first point is back in 2017. And it's important to understand as we are comparing the current plan approaches to plan approaches that were presented and studied in 2017, that there's been a drop in the tax rate per $1,000 over that time. So in 2017, the tax rate per thousand of assessed value was just slightly under $3 per thousand. Today, because of sunsetting or debt that is going away, the tax rate is now slightly over $2.50 per $1,000 of assessed value. When the bond debt decreases again, which will be in 2021-22, and if a bond measure were put forth around 2023 and 2024, the current rate will have dropped again to just slightly more than $2 per $1,000 of assessed value. So you can see the rate has significantly dropped. And what these proposals will do would be to bring the rate back up again to varying levels. And I'm going to explain that to you in just a moment. So to explain that, I'd like to bring your attention for just a moment to this column. This was the $90 million proposal that received the highest level of support back in 2017. That proposal involved maintaining the existing facilities. So they were providing 78% of the estimated total need to repair and maintain facilities. It was providing preschool, the construction of a new elementary to address capacity, and improvements in career technical education and alternative and improvements at the existing high school, alternative high school, and in addition to NAM's entry for safety and security for $90 million. And the tax rate per thousand was $3.92. So please remember that number right there. The 4 plans we'd like you to consider and provide input on this evening are C. You can see they all provide roughly the same amount of maintenance on your existing facilities, between 63 and 67% of the identified need. All of the proposals add a preschool to the 3 schools that have been proposed. I'm going to jump down here. All of the proposals add a new entry at Neil Armstrong for safety and security purposes. All of the proposals provide an allocation towards technology and security. So just a little bit less than half of the total need, but an allocation of it. And in the middle, these projects right here, the new elementary, the new alternative high school, the Fernhill addition, and possible replacement of Cornelius are where the differences are between these schemes. The lowest cost scheme at 89 million only adds the new elementary for 300 to address capacity. That's the only main big project for $90 million. But please note that the tax rate, because the baseline tax rate has dropped, the new tax rate associated with that bond measure is $2.95, or almost $1, nearly $1 less than what was being considered in 2017. D, for $122 million, adds the same new elementary for capacity. It adds a new alternative high school for $21 million. And it adds capacity on the east side as well through a Fern Hill addition. Adding capacity on both sides of the district is an attempt to minimize the boundary adjustments that would need to be made. If capacity is added only on one side of the district, on the west, then more significant boundary adjustments would need to be made in order to distribute students throughout the district. The $135 million plan proposal does not propose building a new elementary on the west side. It does provide the new alternative high school and an addition at Fern Hill, but instead of building the new elementary, it proposes replacing Cornelius, one of your existing schools, and therefore starting the phased replacement of your older schools. The tax rate for that is $3.75 per thousand of assessed value, which is still less than the 2017 $90 million. And E looks at adding a new elementary school, the new high school, alternative high school, and replacing Cornelius. So it's $173 million because of three major projects: the new elementary, 300, high school, and Cornelius. So that gives you a sense of the four plan proposals. We'll take a few minutes, maybe 5 minutes or so, and answer any questions or get any general comments you may have. And then we'd like to conduct a poll to get more specific information and feedback from you.
Okay, we had a couple of different questions. First was, thank you for the age chart. That was good information. Second question, the bond that was passed when the new Joseph Gale building was built included improvements to all schools, which I felt made it more palatable for our community to support, since everyone's neighborhood school is getting something. Will this approach be considered if we plan a new building for a school such as Cornelius?
That would be the intention. So you may remember that at the beginning of, near the beginning of the presentation, based on the guiding principles that were sort of established in 2017, that community advisory group felt that every school in the district should see some benefit. It's not to say that the amount or level of benefit is equal or the same across. There will be instances where Cornelius might be entirely replaced, but every other school should see some benefit come from this bond, because each school needs modernizations and repair to some level.
Okay. For all projects, what degree or percentage of federal funding would help meet the cost estimates?
Unfortunately, the federal government doesn't provide any funding at all for this type of capital improvement, and so associated with the bond measure, and that's just an unfortunate reality. The state, however, does provide limited matching grants, and so the district will almost certainly be applying for these matching grants. It's likely that if you are not already, if you haven't already been identified as being eligible and confirmed, there's a chance that you will be. Those matching grants, they do change a little bit over time, but historically, I think the maximum amount of grant that would be given would be somewhere on the order of $8 million. And so if a community does pass a bond measure, you become eligible for a potential matching grant from the state.
Okay. Deferred maintenance has increased $14 million since 2017. Have we considered how much it will increase before we have the opportunity to address it with a potential bond?
Right. Yeah. So what we do is we take numbers for any of the work that's associated, whether it be a maintenance project or whether it be an addition or a replacement or a new facility. And we begin by getting an estimate in today's dollars. And for each of those projects, we go through a process where we escalate those dollars and costs up to very typically kind of the midpoint of the bond, because we do know the bond period. So if a bond were passed in, say, the year 2022, to pick a number, then we might choose to escalate those dollar costs out to 2025 or 2026. And so that is done to try and take into account the increasing cost of work over that interim period of time, as best as we can take it into account.
Okay, last one. Is the funding recently approved by the school board for electrical and ventilation considered in these plans? I believe those funds, and we dismissed, so maybe Dave just answered that one.
Yeah, those aren't really considered in these plans, but they are something that we think about because of, again, updating ventilation in a school that you're going to replace is not something that we would want to do. So there is some kind of work going on trying to make sure that, but first we'll have to make a decision on what the plan is and then work from there.
So that was all the questions we had thus far.
Okay. Oh, one more. I see.
Oops, one more. Is there the potential to source funds from local corporations to help with these educational improvements?
What I would say there is probably not in a capital sense, but we have lots of great partners who collaborate with us. I know we mentioned Mechatronics earlier, but Mechatronics has a series of corporations that are working with us, not only placing our students, but with curriculum and that kind of thing, but not so much for capital, our buildings themselves.
And I would say that's quite typical for partners that districts work with, is they tend to be more partnerships from an operational side and less from a facility or capital side, capital construction side, generally speaking. Okay, we should move to the next piece here, which is a series of questions that we're going to ask you to provide input on. And for this, what we would like you to do is to use your chat. So at probably the bottom of your screen, you will see a chat area. You can go to that. And I will give you instructions at the beginning of each question. I believe there are 6 of them. Very specific instructions. And yeah, you can answer the questions in the chat.
Just let me provide that slight nuance. We've been having you put your questions thus far in the Q&A. We'd like you to switch over to the chat so that we can save all of your answers in one file. So if you could use the chat, not the Q&A, or just a little bit of a switch in answering there.
Okay. Thank you for that clarification. Okay, so at the begin, for each one of these questions, what we'd like you to do is type in the number of the question first into the chat. And that's going to allow us to more accurately track your answer to the question number itself. So for this one, if you could begin by just typing in the number 1 into your chat. And after you've typed in 1, then you can answer this 2-part question, which I will read off for you. Based on what you know relative to district need, the presentation you saw tonight for educational need, facility condition need, and enrollment capacity, should the district consider implementing the first phase of the long-range plan, so the next 8 to 10 years, by proposing a capital measure, so a bond measure, within the next 2 years to address that need, a bond measure in the next 2 years to address need. And whether it's yes or no, please tell us why or why not. We'll give you 3 or 4 minutes for this, and I'll give you about a 30-second warning before we move to the next question. We'll give about another 30 seconds. Okay, I'm moving to the question number 2. So please type in the number 2 into your chat. And after you've typed in the number 2, the question is, of the approaches presented at this meeting, the plan approaches that you just saw, which one would you most support and why? So what I'd like you to do is, after you've put in the number 2, you can just type in the letter of the plan you would most support. So if you supported, say, the $122 million plan, which included maintenance, preschool, the new elementary, the new alternative high school, and the Fernhill addition, you would type in D, the letter D. So to review these for you while you're thinking about it, the $89 million approach resulted in a $2.95 per thousand of assessed value rate. So it's about $1 less than in 2017. Addressed maintenance, added preschool, and the new elementary for capacity. And that's the extent of that. The $122 million provided maintenance, provided preschool, constructed the new 300-seat elementary, constructed a new alternative high school, and made a Fern Hill addition of classrooms, so adding capacity on each side of the district. The $135 million approach is $3.75 per $1,000 of assessed value, so about 20 cents less than the 2017 rate. Provided maintenance, added preschool, constructed the new alternative high school, built addition on Fern Hill, and replaced Cornelius, but it did not build the new elementary school on the west side for 300 seats. And the $173 million at $4.44 per thousand. So now it's increasing the rate above the 90 million in 2017. Provided maintenance, preschool, built the new elementary, built the new high school, and replaced Cornelius. Okay, we'll give it another 30 seconds. Okay, I'll move to question 3. This will put us halfway through our poll question. So we're going to run a little bit over our 8 o'clock time. I apologize for that, but hopefully you can spare a few more minutes to answer the poll. It's very important. Question number 3, please type in number 3 into your chat. The number 3. And the question is, do you see anything missing from the proposals? And if so, why? So if there's something that you know or you see as a need in the district that has not been included and that you think should be considered or added to a proposal, knowing that adding it could possibly cause another thing to be omitted or taken away from the proposal. If there's anything missing, we would love to hear about it. And if not, you can say, no, I don't see anything missing. I agree, it is a lot to take in one sitting. Okay. Maybe another 20 seconds or so real quick, and then we'll move on to 4. Okay, I'm going to move on to question 4. please type in the number 4. And for this question, we'd like to know whether or not you see anything that should not be included. And if so, why? So this could be something in the plan that you don't think that there is a need for it and therefore it should not be included. Or it could be something that you feel could be a political problem and therefore should not be included because of, you know, political concerns in the community. And if you don't see anything that shouldn't be included, you can just say no, nothing. We're almost there, just 2 questions left. So again, I thank you for allowing us to extend for a few moments over the 8 o'clock. Okay, maybe 20 more seconds and then we'll move on to the next question. Okay, so we'll move on to question 5. So please type in the number 5. I still see some 4s coming in here, so I'll wait for a moment. So for this question, type in question number 5, and then what we would like you to do is to look at the letter in front of each one of the line items. So A, B, C, D, E. Take a look at all of the line items and identify what would be for you the top 3 priorities, the most important things that should be addressed by this plan or plans. And we would like you to type in the sequence of priority. So if, say, deferred maintenance is your top priority, you would type in C, the letter C first, followed by the next priority for you. If it were new elementary, you would type in G. So first priority letter, followed by the second priorities letter, and then the third priority. And just typing in the letters is fine. So if you have 3 priorities, make sure to give us all 3. Okay, give it about another 30 seconds. And last question is coming up. Okay, moving on to our last question. So this is really just more a demographic question. And we would just like to have you answer the two parts of it. The first one is, what school or schools or community are you most affiliated with? So if you are affiliated with Harvey Clark, say, you would type in Harvey Clark, and if you also have children at NAMS, you might type in NAMS too. So school or community you are most closely affiliated with. And that'll just let us know and give us an idea of, who has been participating. And then the second part of the question is, what is your relationship to the district? So in other words, are you a current parent? Do you have students in the district right now? Are you someone who have had children in the district in the past? So maybe you're a grandparent now, or are you may not have children in the district at all. Are you just a community member? Okay. So as people are finishing up their answers to this question, then we will kind of do a quick wrap up here. So a little reminder, we obviously can't promise you anything in terms of what may or may not be delivered from the standpoint of a potential bond or the exact projects, but I think that this will serve as a good outline for helping the district understand where community priorities are. I can tell you that we're going to take this information that you've been provided, and we've taken down your questions, and all of this will be discussed by the district leadership, and with the intent of really trying to understand how it might help further adjustment of the plan, and really, make sure that priorities in the plan are in alignment with what community members are saying and what seems to make sense. So your comments are going to be very important as we kind of move forward with this. I would like to thank you again, because I know doing 2 hours after working all day is a difficult thing to do, and we really appreciate your input and the time that you have given us this evening. There are so many other things that you could be doing, and we really just appreciate it very much. And with that, I think I'll hand it over to Dave, who probably wants to thank you too, I bet.
Yeah. Again, I would just say thank you. This information was very important. And even, I know there were a lot of questions that came up around grade levels and all of, we'll be taking all of that information to put together kind of a plan, not only for the capital bond, but also I know one of the questions was grade level configurations. Just let people know the board and I have had a conversation. We will be next year entering into a conversation with our community about that. So we will be talking more about that coming up. But again, thank you for your help tonight. And we look forward to getting started with improving some of our schools.
Great. All right. That wraps it up. Thank you very much. A lot of information tonight for you all. I know it was an overload. It's a lot to take in one sitting, but thank you. Have a nice night, everyone.